I decided to leave my first husband on Christmas. We were driving back from New Jersey. I know some of you guys know what that drive is like. Yeah, from Jersey to Virginia, Christmas, and he just said something to me that was so shocking that it sent my brain spinning, spiraling, thinking back on the 7 years that we had been together, trying to figure it all out. And it's not like he'd never said anything mean to me before, but this was something else, and it just made me think back over those 7 years, all the way back to our very first argument. So Jason and I, we met at NYU Film School. He was a year younger than me. We worked on some crews together. I thought he was super cute. I had a crush on him. He didn't want anything to do with me. But we were friends. We stayed friends after I graduated. We stayed friends after he graduated. And about 2 years later, I was working in the feature film industry. I was a second assistant director, and he was unemployed. And so we got together. I was about to leave town for a few months. We got together for not a date, but it turned into a date. And we started making out, and it was great. And I was like, this is fantastic, but the timing sucks. Because the next day I was leaving, I was heading to Rhinebeck, which is in upstate New York. So I go upstate, and I'm doing my job, and a week and a half into that movie, a PA, a production assistant, dropped out. 2.5 months, upstate New York, we need a PA. I know a guy who is unemployed. And so I call him up and I say, you want a job? And he says yes, and he comes upstate and he works with me, and it is amazing. I have my boyfriend in this beautiful setting all together. We are having a great time. It is going great for me. It's not going great for Mara, who is the key production assistant, Jason's boss. Everyone pretty quickly figures out that he and I are together, so she very delicately tries to explain to me that he is not great at his job. And I very delicately try to explain to her that that's not really my problem. I mean, it's not hard to be a PA, just carry him along for a while. And it's going okay until about a month into production, when Mara comes to me in tears. And she says Jason was really mean to her, and she had sent him to get coffee for the actors, and he forgot Deborah Unger's coffee, and you can't do that kind of thing, and Deborah was mad at her, and Jason was being mean when she told him to fix it. He said, no, it's stupid, and I was like, all right, that doesn't sound like something Jason would say, but I will talk to him, get another PA to go get Deborah Unger's coffee, and I will talk to him. So I called Jason on the walkie-talkie, and we got together, and I said, listen, I understand that you screwed up an actor's order. You can't really do that. And he said, yeah, but it's just stupid. I mean, who cares? She can have the set coffee like everyone else. And I said, okay. We don't do that to actors, like we're here to serve them. And he's like, well, maybe you're good at bootlicking, but I'm not. And I was like, I understand your anger, but that is the job. And I brought you on this job, and if you don't look good, you're gonna get fired, and you're also gonna look bad for me. So can you please, just for the next month, do the job you were hired to do? And he said, okay. And I thought, whew, that went pretty well. Except that night when I got back to the hotel, we were all staying in the hotel. I was an AD, so I got home like an hour after everyone else. When I got back to the hotel, he didn't pick up his phone. He didn't come to my room like he'd been doing most nights. And I thought, okay, he fell asleep, it's fine. But then the next day on set, he didn't casually bump into me like we would often do during the day. He didn't sit with me at lunch. He seemed to be avoiding me. And I thought, okay, he's embarrassed. He's not doing a good job. He knows it. He's embarrassed. Except that night when I finally got to talk to him, and I said, hey, how are you doing? He said, not good. well, okay, are you just feeling bad? And he said, yeah, I'm mad at you. And I said, you're mad at me? And he explained that I had been mean to him and that I had taken Mara's side over his and that I had chosen work over him and that he didn't know if this relationship was going to work out. And I got nervous because I loved him and I didn't want to lose him, and so I found myself apologizing. And we worked it out, and it went back to being great. And at the time, I thought, okay, first fight, we did it, we worked it out, everything is good. But sitting in that truck, driving back from New Jersey, silently next to him after he had said this thing to me, all I kept thinking was, that was the first time he punished me. That was the first time of many that he was teaching me what happens when I don't listen. A couple years later, we were living together, and his friend was over. His friends were always over, and he chose the movie. We were watching They Live, John Carpenter film. I'd never seen it, but I like John Carpenter. I like a lot of his movies, and so we watched the movie. And when it was over, he said to me and his friend, "What did you guys think?" And I said, "Oh, I liked it." And he said, "No, you didn't." And I was like, "Yeah, I did. Like, I liked it." And he's like, "You're just lying so people will think you're cool." And I didn't want to get in a fight in front of his friend, so I just left the room. And a little while later, his friend left, and then he came upstairs. And he said, "Oh, you're upset." And I said, "Yeah, I'm a little upset. I don't like the way you talk to me." And he said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "It's fine, whatever." And he's like, No, I'm sorry." And then he banged his head against the wall. And I was like, "All right, stop. You're being silly." And then he said, "No, I'm sorry." And he banged his head against the wall again and again and again. And I started saying, "Stop, you're gonna hurt yourself." And he kept doing it. And I said, "Stop." And then I started crying because he wouldn't stop. And then finally he turned to me and he laughed and he said, "You are so easy to upset." And I couldn't stop crying and shaking, and he wrapped his arms around me and he said, It's okay to be emotional, it's fine." And then I felt like it was okay. But in that car, driving back from New Jersey, thinking about that and the other thing, a pattern started to emerge that I had never seen before, a pattern of him hurting me and me apologizing for it. And there were countless times that came to mind. The time his friends came over and we were having board game night, and he went in the other room when we were done with the one game, and then one of his friends said, "Let's play Taboo." And he came back into the room and he goes, "Oh, Jessica chose Taboo because she knows I hate it." And it was such a stupid thing. But I didn't want to cry in front of his friends, so I walked away, and he followed me, and I could hear his friend say, "Why are you so mean to her?" And Jason followed me into the other room, and he's like, "There you are, being all dramatic," and I didn't want to be dramatic, so I went back to the table, and it was okay. Or the time we went hiking, and he was teasing me. He liked to tease me. He was teasing me, and we were walking together, and he wouldn't stop, and I kept telling him to stop, and he wouldn't stop. And then finally I said, "Just leave me alone." So he did, on the trail, left me alone for 5 hours. And by the time I got back to the car, I was scared and I was crying, and he said, "Oh, well, you gotta make up your mind. Do you want me to leave you alone or don't you?" And in that car, all I kept thinking was how I had failed to see it for all those years. Because his behavior clearly was so clear to me in that moment that it all added up to the same thing, that he hurt me, and when I tried to figure it out it turned into some variation of, well, you made me do it. And this time on Christmas, it was different for me. Not because what he said was so bad, but because it felt so out of place. We were driving back from New Jersey to Virginia. He was driving back from New Jersey to Virginia. I had fallen asleep. We were probably still in North Jersey when I fell asleep. I woke up when he jerked the wheel. And I looked around, and we were in Delaware, everyone's favorite state. And he was gripping that wheel. You know, he had that death grip on it. It was probably 11:30 at night, and he was squinting. He was trying to keep his eyes open. So I sat up and I said, "Hey, do you want me to drive?" And he said, "No." So I kind of cleared my head, and I drank some water, and I thought, you know, we're in Delaware on Christmas. It's going to be a drive. So I said, "Listen, if you want, you could just pull over at the next rest stop, and we can switch. I'll take over. It's fine." And with no further prompting, he turned to me and he said, "You fucking bitch." And in that moment, I knew without fail that it was not my fault, that I had not caused him to say that. And as I thought silently in the car next to him and this pattern emerged, I realized that no man would say that to a woman. No man would say that to a woman unless that man was used to abusing her. Thank you.